The cold October rain pounded mercilessly against the streets of Charleston, West Virginia, each drop another reminder of how far Callie Harper had fallen. Her worn-out sneakers squelched against the wet pavement as she clutched her son Mason tighter against her chest. His small frame warmed despite the biting wind that whipped through her thin, oversized sweater. "Just a little further, baby," she whispered, her honey-blonde hair plastered to her face. Her gray-blue eyes scanned the street desperately for shelter, while Mason's tiny fingers gripped her sweater. At 22, she hadn't imagined she'd be running through the rain, practically homeless, with a 14-month-old baby in her arms. But then again, she hadn't imagined a lot of things about her life would turn out this way. The neon sign of Jerry's coffee shop flickered weakly ahead, its awning promising temporary refuge from the downpour. Callie made a dash for it, her feet sliding slightly on the slick sidewalk. Her heart pounded, not from the exertion, but from the gnawing fear that had become her constant companion since leaving Elliot. Through the curtain of rain, a tall figure emerged. For a heartbeat, panic seized her chest. The silhouette, the way he stood, her mind played its cruel trick, superimposing Elliot's image onto the stranger. In that moment of blind terror, she did something that would alter the course of her life forever. She ran straight into the stranger's arms. The scent hit her first. Bleu de Chanel, not Elliot's signature oud wood. The embrace was different too. Where Elliot had been all sharp edges and cold authority, this man was solid warmth. Callie froze, mortification flooding her cheeks as she looked up into eyes the color of moss after rain. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, attempting to step back, but her worn sneaker slipped on the wet concrete. The stranger's hands steadied her shoulders, gentle yet firm. "Are you all right?" His voice was deep, concerned, nothing like Elliot's calculated tones. Mason, usually shy around strangers, peered up at the man with curious eyes. Callie finally got a clear look at him. Tall, impeccably dressed in a long coat that probably cost more than 6 months of her rent, with dark brown hair and features that belonged in a business magazine. This was no ordinary stranger. Everything about him screamed wealth and success. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice betrayed her. I thought you were someone else. I'm sorry." Caleb Thorne had been having what he considered a typical day. Meetings, acquisitions, the usual dance of power and money that had defined his life for the past decade. At 34, he'd built his technology empire on logic and careful planning. Nothing in his meticulously organized world had prepared him for the jolt of electricity that shot through his body when this rain-soaked young woman crashed into his arms. He should have been annoyed. His Italian wool coat was now damp, his schedule interrupted, but something in her eyes, fear mixed with a fierce determination, struck a chord he thought had long since gone silent. "You're shivering," he observed, already shrugging off his coat. Before Callie could protest, he'd draped it over her shoulders, creating a warm cocoon around her and Mason. "I can't take this," she said immediately, trying to remove it with one hand while balancing Mason with the other. "It's probably worth more than my—" She caught herself before finishing the sentence, but Caleb could fill in the blank. "Keep it," he said firmly, "at least until the rain stops." He glanced at the coffee shop behind them. "Let me buy you a coffee. You look like you could use something warm." Callie's pride warred with practical necessity. Mason was starting to fuss, and the warmth of the coat was seductive after so many months of being cold. Still, she'd learned the hard way that nothing in life came without strings. "I don't accept charity," she said, lifting her chin slightly. The gesture struck Caleb. It wasn't arrogance, but the last stand of someone who'd had everything else stripped away. "It's not charity," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "Consider it an apology for being in your way when you were running." A ghost of a smile touched Callie's lips, and something in Caleb's chest tightened. "Oh, that's not how I remember it happening." "Memory is subjective," he said, opening the door to Jerry's. The warm aroma of coffee wafted out, along with the sound of jazz playing softly over tired speakers. "Shall we debate it over coffee?" Mason chose that moment to let out a small sneeze, making the decision for his mother. Callie nodded, following Caleb into the warmth of the coffee shop. As they settled into a worn booth, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped onto a path that would change everything. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that danced across Caleb's features. He watched as Callie expertly settled Mason in her lap, noting the careful way she moved. as if expecting the world to be yanked out from under her at any moment. "What's your poison?" he asked, nodding toward the menu board with its faded chalk lettering. "Coffee with cinnamon," she answered automatically, then added, "If they have it." "Interesting choice." He raised an eyebrow, filing away this detail like the businessman he was. "I'm more of a straight black coffee person myself. Let me guess, like your soul?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, and Callie's eyes widened in horror. But instead of being offended, Caleb laughed, a rich, genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. "That's the first time anyone's dared to suggest I have a soul in years," he said, standing to order their drinks. As he walked to the counter, Callie found herself studying him. Everything about him spoke of power and privilege, yet there was something else there, a loneliness that echoed her own. When he returned with their coffees, Mason was playing with the sugar packets, building tiny towers that collapsed under his chubby fingers. Callie quickly gathered them up, murmuring an apology. "He's not bothering anything," Caleb said, sliding her coffee across the table. The aroma of cinnamon rose with the steam, and for a moment, Callie closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. When she opened them, she found Caleb watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Thank you," she said softly, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup, "for the coffee and the coat. But we should probably go once the rain lets up. I'm sure you have better things to do than sit in a rundown coffee shop with—" "Actually," Caleb interrupted, "I don't." He took a sip of his coffee, grimaced slightly, then added, "This might be the most interesting thing that's happened to me in years." The rain continued to drum against the windows, creating a cocoon of privacy in the nearly empty coffee shop. Outside, Charleston carried on its busy evening rush, but in here, time seemed to slow down. Neither Callie nor Caleb knew it yet, but this moment, this simple sharing of coffee in a shabby cafe, was the beginning of something that would change them both forever. Mason babbled happily, reaching for Caleb's tie, and for once, Callie didn't immediately pull him back. Something about this moment felt safe, despite every lesson life had taught her about trusting strangers. Perhaps it was the way Caleb's eyes crinkled when he smiled at Mason, or how he didn't seem to mind when the baby deposited sticky fingerprints on his pristine shirt. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and for once, Callie wasn't in a hurry for it to stop. Caleb Thorne sat in his corner office on the 32nd floor of the Thorne Technologies building, staring at the rain-streaked windows. 3 days had passed since his encounter with Callie Harper, and he couldn't shake the memory of her gray-blue eyes, or the way Mason's tiny hands had reached for his tie, the half-empty cup of coffee with cinnamon on his desk. His fourth attempt to recreate the warmth he'd felt in that run-down cafe had gone cold. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Thorne, the board is waiting in the conference room." He straightened his tie, the same one now sporting a tiny sticky fingerprint he couldn't bring himself to clean. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." Instead of heading to the conference room, he found himself pulling up a search on his laptop. It hadn't taken much to find information about Callie. His security team was thorough. What he discovered made his jaw clench. Elliot Lancaster, heir to Lancaster Industries, divorced father of one, known for his aggressive business tactics and controlling behavior. The phone on his desk rang, displaying his sister's name. "Olivia," he answered, his voice softening slightly. "You missed Mom's birthday dinner," Olivia Thorne Martinez said without preamble. "Again, I sent flowers." "Flowers don't make up for an empty chair, Caleb. Since Madeline—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than he intended. "I have a board meeting." "You always have a meeting." Olivia's sigh crackled through the phone. "When was the last time you did something that wasn't about work?" 3 days ago, he thought, remembering the sound of Callie's unexpected laughter, but he didn't say it aloud. Across town, Callie stood behind the counter at the Daily Grind, a coffee shop several steps up from Jerry's but still worlds away from the high-end cafes she used to frequent. Her manager, Ruby Wilson, a warm-hearted woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around her eyes, was teaching her how to make elaborate latte art. "You're a natural," Ruby said, watching Callie create a perfect heart in the foam. "Most people take weeks to get this right," Callie smiled, tucking a strand of honey-blonde hair behind her ear. The job was a godsend. Ruby not only hired her on the spot, but also allowed Mason to stay in the small office during her shifts. The pay wasn't much, but it was honest work, something that was hers alone. The bell above the door chimed, and Callie's heart stopped. A man in an expensive suit walked in, and for a moment, she was back in her old life, watching Elliot approach with that cold smile that never reached his eyes. But it wasn't him, just another businessman seeking his morning caffeine fix. "You okay, honey?" Ruby touched her arm gently. "You went white as a sheet." "I'm fine," Callie assured her, but her hands trembled as she reached for another cup. The warmth of Caleb's coat still lingered in her memory, though she'd left it at Jerry's with a note of thanks. She couldn't afford to keep something so expensive, couldn't risk owing anything to anyone. The afternoon rush kept her busy until closing time. As she wiped down tables, Mason played contentedly in his playpen in Ruby's office, surrounded by toys the older woman had brought from home. "Someone left this for you," Ruby said, emerging from the back with an envelope. Callie's name was written in elegant handwriting on the front. Inside was a business card for Thorne Technologies, and a note. The coffee with cinnamon wasn't the same without the company. See, Callie's fingers traced the embossed lettering on the card. CEO and founder. Of course, she'd seen the Thorne Technologies building downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to touch the clouds. The man who'd shared coffee with her in a shabby cafe wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. "Friend of yours?" Ruby asked, her eyes twinkling. "No," Callie said quickly, tucking the card into her pocket. "Just someone I met. Later that night, in her tiny rented room above Mrs. O'Malley's garage." Callie curled up in the threadbare armchair while Mason slept in his second-hand crib. The room was clean but sparse, a hot plate for cooking, a mini fridge that hummed too loudly, and a bathroom so small she had to turn sideways to close the door. But it was safe, and Mrs. O'Malley, a widow in her 70s, doted on Mason. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Had lunch at Jerry's today. Their coffee with cinnamon needs work. Know anywhere better?" Her heart raced. How did he get her number? The answer came immediately. Of course, he had resources. She should be angry at the invasion of privacy, but instead, she found herself smiling. "The daily grind on 4th Street, she typed back before she could stop herself. "But I'm biased. I work there." His response came quickly. "What a coincidence. I have a meeting nearby tomorrow morning." Callie stared at the phone, her finger hovering over the keys. She thought of Elliot, of all the ways power could be wielded like a weapon, but then she remembered the gentle way Caleb had smiled at Mason, how he'd offered his coat without expectation. "We open at 6, she wrote finally. "Fair warning, our clientele usually wears less expensive suits. I'll dress down. Wouldn't want to intimidate the coffee beans." A laugh escaped her, waking Mason. As she soothed him back to sleep, her phone buzzed again. "Thank you for the note with my coat, though you didn't have to leave it behind." She didn't respond to that one. How could she explain that keeping it would have felt like accepting a chain, no matter how beautifully gilded? That independence, even in poverty, was better than luxury with strings attached. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Callie dressed carefully in her work uniform, black pants and a burgundy polo with the Daily Grinds logo. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she'd applied a touch of mascara. Not for any particular reason, she told herself. Ruby raised an eyebrow when she arrived early. "Expecting someone. Just trying to be professional," Callie muttered, focusing intently on setting up the espresso machine. At precisely 6:15 the door chimed. Caleb walked in wearing dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He'd tried to dress casually, but there was no hiding the inherent elegance in his bearing. "Good morning," he said, his eyes finding hers immediately. "I heard this place has excellent coffee with cinnamon." Behind her, Ruby made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Callie shot her a warning look before turning back to Caleb. We do our best. What can I get you?" "Surprise me." He leaned against the counter, close enough that she caught the familiar scent of Bleu de Chanel. "I trust your judgment." As she worked, she could feel his eyes on her, studying her practiced movements. She added an extra dash of cinnamon to his latte, creating a delicate leaf pattern in the foam. "Beautiful," he said when she handed him the cup, and somehow she knew he wasn't just talking about the coffee. "It's just foam art," she said, deflecting. "Ruby taught me. Speaking of art," he took a sip. "I have 2 tickets to the symphony this Friday, Beethoven's 9th. Callie's hands stilled on the counter. "Mr. Thorne." "Caleb," he corrected. "Caleb," she said carefully. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Because of Lancaster." Her head snapped up, and he had the grace to look apologetic. I should have mentioned. I had you looked into. Professional habit. I'm sorry. You're sorry for investigating me or sorry for bringing it up? Both. He set down his cup. I know about the divorce, about Lancaster's reputation. I understand why you'd be cautious, but it's just a symphony, Callie. No strings attached. She thought of her one nice dress, hanging in Mrs. O'Malley's closet because her room didn't have space for it. Thought of Mason, who would need a sitter. Thought of how long it had been since she'd heard live music. I can't, she said finally. I have Mason and Ruby already offered to babysit, he interrupted, and Ruby didn't even pretend not to be listening anymore. She said, and I quote, that girl needs a night out. Callie turned to her manager in betrayal. Ruby shrugged, unrepentant. He's right, honey. You work too hard. One night of music won't kill you. One night of music almost did. Once, Callie murmured, remembering the charity gala where she'd first met Elliot. How the orchestra had played Beethoven then too. Something in her tone made Caleb straighten. Different symphony, different man, he said quietly. But the choice is yours. No pressure, no expectations. The morning rush was starting, giving her an excuse to step back. I'll think about it. He nodded, accepting her answer without pushing. The coffee was perfect, by the way. He left a $20 tip in the jar and headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. You know how to reach me if you change your mind. After he left, Ruby bumped Callie's shoulder gently. He's not Elliot, she said softly. No, Callie agreed, watching Caleb's figure disappear down the street. That's what scares me. Friday morning arrived with an envelope. Callie found it slipped under the door of her tiny room, her name written in now familiar elegant handwriting. Inside were 2 tickets to the symphony and a short note. Still no strings, just music. She sat on her bed, Mason babbling happily in his crib as he played with his worn teddy bear. The tickets felt heavy in her hands, weighted with possibility and terror in equal measure. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ruby. Girl, if you don't go tonight, I'm docking your pay. It was followed by a winking emoji. I don't have anything to wear, Callie typed back. A last, desperate excuse. Check outside your door again. Heart pounding, Callie opened her door to find a large white box from Nordstrom. Inside was a midnight blue cocktail dress that made her gasp. Simple but elegant, with a sweetheart neckline and a flowing skirt that would hit just below her knees. Another text from Ruby. Before you panic, it wasn't from him. The girls at the shop all pitched in. We've been saving our tips. You deserve this night. Tears pricked at Callie's eyes. She'd been so focused on surviving, on keeping Mason safe, that she'd almost forgotten what kindness felt like. Across town, Caleb stood in his office, staring out at the Charleston skyline. His phone lay on his desk, open to a concerning email from his head of security. Mr. Thorne, Elliot Lancaster made inquiries about your recent movements. He's aware of your visits to the daily grind. Exercise caution. Davidson. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. His sister Olivia entered without waiting for a response, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. So, she said, perching on the edge of his desk. Who is she? Caleb didn't bother pretending not to understand. How did you find out? You bought symphony tickets. You hate the symphony. Olivia's dark eyes, so similar to his own, studied him carefully. Not since Madeline. This is different, he said sharply. Clearly, Olivia picked up a framed photo on his desk. Caleb with their parents at his company's launch party. Mom said you seemed distracted at breakfast yesterday. Actually ordered coffee with cinnamon instead of black. I'm expanding my palate. Right. Olivia's expression softened. Just be careful, okay? After what happened with Madeline. Callie isn't Madeline, Caleb interrupted. She's nothing like her. Callie? Olivia's eyebrows rose. So there is someone. Caleb cursed internally. His sister had always been able to get under his guard. Oh, it's just a symphony, Liv. Nothing is ever just anything with you, little brother. She stood, smoothing her skirt. But if you're actually willing to sit through Beethoven, she must be special. After Olivia left, Caleb found himself opening his laptop, pulling up the file his security team had compiled on Elliot Lancaster. The man's business practices were aggressive to the point of being predatory, but it was the sealed court records from his marriage to Callie that concerned Caleb most. He'd seen the fear in Callie's eyes when she'd mistaken him for her ex-husband. That wasn't the kind of fear that came from a simple bad marriage. At the daily grind, the afternoon rush was winding down when the bell chimed. Callie looked up from wiping tables and froze. A man in an expensive suit stood in the doorway, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought it was Elliot. But no, the suit was wrong, the stance different. "Ms. Harper," the man approached, his manner professional. "I'm Davidson, head of security for Thorne Technologies." He handed her a business card. "Mr. Thorne asked me to ensure you have a secure way to and from the symphony tonight." Callie's first instinct was to refuse, but something in Davidson's eyes made her pause. Did something happen? Davidson hesitated. "It's probably nothing, but Mr. Lancaster has been making inquiries. Mr. Thorne thought you should be aware." The cleaning cloth in Callie's hand dropped to the floor. Elliot was looking into her life again, which meant he knew about Caleb. Which meant, "Hey," Ruby's hand was on her shoulder. "Breathe, honey. You're safe here." Davidson nodded respectfully to Ruby. "We have security personnel stationed nearby. They're very discreet. Mr. Thorne just wants to ensure your safety." "And Mason's?" Callie's voice was barely a whisper. "The baby is under our protection as well," Davidson assured her. "Mrs. O'Malley's house is being monitored." Callie should have felt violated by this surveillance, but instead, an overwhelming sense of relief washed over her. For so long, she'd been looking over her shoulder, waiting for Elliot to find her. Now, for the first time, she had allies. "Thank you," she managed. Davidson gave her a card with his direct number and left as quietly as he'd arrived. Ruby squeezed her shoulder. Still planning to skip the symphony, Callie touched the card in her apron pocket. "No," she said finally. "I'm done letting fear rule my life." The rest of her shift passed in a blur. At 6, Ruby shooed her out, promising to pick up Mason from Mrs. O'Malley's and keep him overnight. "He'll be fine," Ruby assured her. "That boy loves his Aunt Ruby's pancakes." In her tiny bathroom, Callie transformed herself with trembling hands. The dress from her co-workers fit perfectly, skimming her curves without being tight. She left her honey blonde hair down in soft waves and applied makeup for the first time in months, just enough to enhance her gray-blue eyes and add color to her lips. When she emerged from Mrs. O'Malley's garage apartment, a sleek black car was waiting. The driver opened the door, and she slid into the leather interior, her heart pounding. The Charleston Clay Center for the Arts and Sciences loomed ahead, its modern architecture gleaming in the evening light. Callie's hands twisted in her lap as the car pulled up to the entrance. The last time she'd been here was with Elliot, at a charity gala where he'd spent the evening parading her around like a trophy while whispering cutting remarks in her ear. But when the car door opened, it wasn't Elliot waiting for her. Caleb stood at the bottom of the steps, devastating in a perfectly tailored black suit. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. Callie took it, feeling the solid strength beneath his jacket. "Thank you for the security," she said quietly as they climbed the steps. "Davidson told me about Elliot." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I won't let him hurt you. You barely know me." He stopped, turning to face her. "I know enough. I know you're brave enough to start over with nothing but your son and your dignity. I know you'd rather work honest hours at a coffee shop than accept help you haven't earned. I know you have the most genuine smile I've seen in years, even though you don't show it often." Callie's heart thundered in her chest. "I'm Caleb, and I know," he continued softly, "that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you crashed into my arms in the rain." Before she could respond, the doors to the concert hall opened, spilling light and classical music onto the steps. Caleb offered his arm again, and Callie took it, letting him lead her into the warmth of the building. Their seats were in a private box, away from the crowd. As they settled in, Callie caught snippets of whispered conversations from nearby patrons. "Isn't that Caleb Thorne? Who's the woman with him? First time he's brought a date since." The lights dimmed, and the first notes of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony filled the air. Callie closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. When she opened them, she found Caleb watching her instead of the orchestra. "What?" she whispered. "You look peaceful," he murmured back. "It suits you." During intermission, Caleb went to get them drinks. Callie stood by the balcony looking out over the lobby below, when a familiar voice froze her blood. Well, moving up in the world again, I see." She turned slowly. Elliot Lancaster stood there, elegant as ever in his tailored suit, the scent of oud wood cologne surrounding him like a toxic cloud. His perfectly trimmed beard did nothing to soften the cruel twist of his lips. What are you doing here?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I own a box," he said smoothly, stepping closer. "The real question is, what are you doing here? Playing Cinderella with Caleb Thorne?" His eyes raked over her dress. "We both know how this story ends, don't we? A girl like you, trying to climb the social ladder again. Step away from her." Caleb's voice cut through the air like a blade. He handed Callie a glass of champagne and placed himself slightly in front of her, a subtle but clear gesture of protection. Elliot's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Caleb Thorne, I've been meaning to congratulate you on your company's latest acquisition." "Save it," Caleb said coldly. "I know exactly what kind of man you are, Lancaster." "Do you?" Elliot's gaze slid to Callie. "Has she told you everything? About our marriage? About why she really left?" Callie's hand trembled so badly she nearly dropped her champagne. Caleb steadied her glass, his fingers brushing hers. "She doesn't have to," Caleb replied. "Your reputation speaks for itself." The warning chimes for the second half sounded. Elliot's smile turned predatory. "Enjoy the symphony," he said, his eyes locked on Callie. "We'll talk again soon. After all, I've been meaning to discuss Mason's future." He walked away, leaving Callie shaking. Caleb turned to her immediately, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you okay?" She nodded mechanically, but they both knew it was a lie. The rest of the symphony passed in a blur of music she could barely hear over the pounding of her heart. Elliot's threat hung in the air like poison. When the concert ended, Caleb led her quickly to the waiting car. Once inside, Callie finally let out the breath she'd been holding since Elliot's appearance. "He's going to try to take Mason," she whispered, voicing her greatest fear. Caleb's hand found hers in the darkness of the car. "I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. Watch me." His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I protect what's mine." Callie turned to him sharply. "I'm not yours." "No," he agreed, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "But you're not his anymore either, and I'll be damned if I let him cage you again." The car pulled up to Mrs. O'Malley's house. Light spilled from Ruby's window upstairs, where she was probably reading Mason a bedtime story. Caleb walked Callie to her door, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. The security, the symphony. Thank you for trusting me enough to come." He touched her cheek gently. "We'll deal with Lancaster. Together." As she watched him leave, Callie realized with startling clarity that she was standing at a crossroads. Behind her lay the safety of isolation, of keeping everyone at arm's length. Ahead lay the unknown, trust, possibility, and yes, danger. But for the first time in years, she wasn't facing that danger alone. The Monday morning sunlight filtered through the windows of Caleb's office as he reviewed the documents on his desk. Legal papers, surveillance reports, and background checks formed neat stacks across the polished surface. Davidson stood before him, delivering his latest findings. "Lancaster's been busy," Davidson said, sliding another folder across the desk. "He's hired Preston and Meyer law firm. They specialize in high-profile custody battles." Caleb's jaw tightened. He knew the firm's reputation. They were sharks who specialized in character assassination. "And they've been gathering information. Mrs. O'Malley's garage apartment isn't up to code for a child. The Daily Grind's employee insurance doesn't cover dependents. They're building a case that Callie can't provide adequate care for Mason." The pen in Caleb's hand snapped, ink staining his fingers. "Get me everything on Preston and Meyer. Every case they've lost. Every skeleton in their closets. Already on it." Davidson hesitated. "There's more. Lancaster's been meeting with your competitors. Specifically, Meyer's Tech." Caleb leaned back, understanding dawning. "He's trying to hit me from both sides, personal and professional." "Yes, sir. Meyer's Tech has been trying to acquire that AI startup you've been negotiating with." A knock at the door interrupted them. Olivia entered, her expression grim. "The board's asking questions about the Lancaster situation. They're worried about potential negative press." "The board can worry about their stock options," Caleb said sharply. "This is personal. That's exactly what they're afraid of." Olivia sat down, crossing her legs. "They think you're letting emotions cloud your judgment. Like with Madeline." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Davidson quietly excused himself, closing the door behind him. "This isn't like Madeline," Caleb said, his voice low. Auntie Callie isn't trying to steal company secrets or sell inside information to competitors. No, Olivia agreed softly. She's just a single mother who happened to catch my brother's attention. But Lancaster is using that to his advantage. The board's nervous about the Myers Tech situation. I can handle Myers Tech. Can you handle seeing Callie dragged through the mud? Because that's what Preston and Meyer will do. They'll dig up everything, her family, her past, every mistake she's ever made. Caleb stood, walking to the window. Below, Charleston bustled with morning traffic, unaware of the storm brewing in the glass tower above. I won't let that happen. How? By throwing money at the problem? Olivia's voice softened. Caleb, I saw how you looked at her at the symphony, but maybe the best way to protect her is to step back. That's what Lancaster wants. Since when do you care what Elliot Lancaster wants? Caleb turned to face his sister. Since I saw the fear in Callie's eyes when she heard his voice. Since I realized that man isn't just after custody, he wants to break her. At the daily grind, Callie was struggling to maintain her composure as she served the morning rush. Ruby had been shooting her concerned looks all morning, ever since she'd arrived with dark circles under her eyes. The bell chimed, and Callie's heart skipped, but it was just the mail carrier, delivering a thick envelope addressed to her. Her hands trembled as she opened it during her break. Legal papers. Preston and Myers' letterhead gleamed at the top, followed by pages of allegations about her fitness as a mother. They documented everything: her tiny living space, her minimal income, the lack of healthcare benefits. They even mentioned her appearance at the symphony, twisting it to paint her as someone who prioritized social climbing over her child's welfare. Oh, honey. Ruby's voice made her jump. Her manager stood in the doorway of the break room, concern etched on her face. What is it? Elliot, Callie whispered. He's trying to take Mason. Ruby's face hardened. Like hell he is. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Caleb. No, Callie grabbed her wrist. This is exactly what Elliot wants. He's trying to prove I'm using Caleb, that I'm just looking for another rich man to solve my problems. That's ridiculous. Anyone with eyes can see. The break room door opened again. A woman in an impeccable suit stood there, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Miss Harper? I'm Andrea Myers, CEO of Myers Technology. Callie stood slowly, very aware of her coffee-stained apron and messy ponytail. Can I help you? Actually, Andrea smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. I'm here to help you. May we speak privately? Ruby started to protest, but Callie touched her arm. It's okay. I'll be fine. Once they were alone, Andrea got straight to the point. I understand you're in a difficult situation with Elliot Lancaster. I have a proposition that could solve your problems. I'm listening. Myers Tech is prepared to offer you a comfortable settlement, enough to get a proper apartment, provide for Mason, even start a college fund. Andrea pulled out a business card. All we need is some information about Caleb Thorne's newest tech acquisition. Callie felt sick. You want me to spy on Caleb? Think of it as ensuring your son's future. Lancaster's lawyers are very good, but with financial stability, the best legal representation, Andrea shrugged. The choice is yours. Callie looked at the business card, then back at the legal papers. The amount they were offering would solve everything. She could get a real apartment, hire a good lawyer, give Mason everything he deserved. But the cost? No, she said quietly. Excuse me? I said no. Callie straightened, channeling every lesson in poise her mother had ever taught her. I won't betray Caleb's trust. Andrea's smile turned cold. Loyalty is admirable, Ms. Harper. But can Caleb Thorne say the same? Ask him about Madeline sometime. Ask him what happened to the last woman he tried to protect. She left Callie standing in the break room, clutching the legal papers with shaking hands. Ruby came in immediately, wrapping her in a hug. You did good, honey, she whispered. But you need to tell Caleb about this. Tell me what? They both turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, his expression darkening as he took in Callie's tears and the papers in her hands. Andrea Myers was just here, Callie said. She offered me money for information about your company. Something dangerous flashed in Caleb's eyes. What did you tell her? Nothing. The word came out sharper than she intended. I would never. She broke off, hurt by his question. His expression softened immediately. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked that. He moved closer, gently taking the legal papers from her hands. Lancaster's lawyers? She nodded. They're going to take him away from me, aren't they? They're going to take Mason. No. Caleb's voice was firm. They won't. He pulled out his phone. Davidson, get me everything on Andrea Myers' recent meetings. And call Julian Bennett at Bennett & Associates. Tell him it's urgent. Ruby touched Callie's arm. Take the rest of the day off, honey. I'll cover your shift. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling. Ruby's tone brooked no argument. Go with Caleb. Figure this out. The ride to Thorne Technologies was silent. Callie lost in thought as she watched the city pass by. In the elevator, Caleb finally spoke. Who's Madeline? Callie saw him stiffen. Andrea mentioned her. She said I should ask you about her. About what happened to the last woman you tried to protect. The elevator doors opened to his private floor. Caleb led her to his office, closing the door behind them. Madeline was my fiancée, he said finally, standing by the window. 3 years ago, she worked for Myers Tech. Understanding dawned. She was spying on you. Yes. His voice was raw. She got close to me, got access to sensitive information. By the time I discovered the truth, Myers Tech had already stolen the patents for a revolutionary security system we were developing. I'm sorry, Callie whispered. He turned to face her. That's why I asked what you told Andrea. Old habits die hard. I would never do that to you. I know. He moved closer, cupping her face in his hands. That's what scares me. You're not Madeline. You're genuine and brave and stubborn as hell, and Lancaster is going to use that against you. What do you mean? He knows you won't use me for money or influence, so he's going to make it look like I'm using you, like I'm the rich man taking advantage of a vulnerable single mother. Callie stepped back, realization hitting her. That's why he was at the symphony. He wanted people to see us together. Yes, and now Myers Tech is involved, which means this is bigger than just custody. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. Lancaster's trying to force me to choose between protecting you and protecting my company. Then choose your company, Callie said firmly. I won't let you destroy everything you've built for me. That's not your decision to make. Yes, it is. She backed away from him. I won't be responsible for you losing everything. Not when you've already done so much. Callie. No. She grabbed her purse. I need to pick up Mason from Mrs. O'Malley's. I need to think. She fled before he could stop her, taking the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. Outside, the afternoon sun was harsh, reflecting off the glass buildings until she could barely see. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Smart choice, leaving his office. But is it enough? Aunt Elliot was watching her, had probably been watching her all along. Another text came through, this one from Caleb. Whatever you're thinking, don't do it alone. Please. Callie stared at the two messages, feeling the weight of impossible choices crushing her chest. Stay, and watch Caleb lose everything he'd built. Leave, and face Lancaster's lawyers alone. Or maybe there was a third option. One that would require more courage than running away, more strength than letting Caleb fight her battles. She looked up at the gleaming tower of Thorne Technologies, then at the legal papers in her bag. It was time to stop being a victim, time to start fighting back. But first, she needed to know the whole truth about Madeline, because something in Andrea Myers' smile suggested there was more to that story than Caleb had shared. And if she was going to fight this war, she needed to know exactly what kind of battlefield she was walking into. The old newspaper articles were spread across Mrs. O'Malley's kitchen table, their headlines telling fragments of a story Callie was struggling to piece together. Mason played contentedly in his playpen nearby while Mrs. O'Malley brewed tea, the familiar scent of Earl Grey filling the cozy space. Tech Titan's fiancé found dead, Callie read softly. Ours Madeline Winter's death ruled suicide amid corporate espionage investigation. Such a terrible business, Mrs. O'Malley murmured, setting a steaming cup beside Callie. I remember when it happened. That poor girl. Callie's fingers traced the grainy photograph accompanying the article. Madeline Winter had been beautiful, dark-haired and elegant, with a smile that seemed to hide secrets. The article detailed her last days, the discovery that she'd been stealing information from Thorne Technologies, the impending criminal charges, and finally, her death in her penthouse apartment. The police ruled it suicide, Callie said, but Andrea Myers implied there was more to the story. Mrs. O'Malley settled into the chair across from her, blue eyes sharp despite her age. Sometimes people say things to cause trouble, dear. especially in matters of the heart. But why would she want me to ask about Madeline specifically? Callie pulled up another article on her phone. Look, Myers Tech filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Thorne Technologies 3 months after Madeline died. It was settled out of court, which means there's probably a lot we don't know, a new voice said. Ruby stood in the doorway, still in her daily grind uniform. And maybe some things we shouldn't go digging up. Callie jumped. Ruby, I thought you were working late, finished early, thought you might need a friend. Ruby sat down, eyeing the scattered articles. You're really going down this rabbit hole, huh? I need to know what I'm dealing with. Callie pulled out the business card Andrea Myers had given her. She wasn't just trying to get information about Caleb's company. She wanted me to doubt him. And is it working? Mrs. O'Malley asked gently. Before Callie could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Davidson. Ms. Harper, urgent. Lancaster's lawyers filed an emergency custody motion, hearing scheduled for next week. The room seemed to tilt. Ruby caught her arm as she swayed. Breathe, honey. What is it? Elliot. He's moving faster than we thought. The custody hearing is next week. Callie's voice cracked. I can't lose Mason, I can't. You won't. Ruby's voice was firm. But you need to talk to Caleb. Whatever happened with Madeline, he's the only one with enough resources to fight Lancaster. That's what Elliot's counting on, Callie whispered. He wants me to run to Caleb, to prove I'm just using him for his money and influence. Mrs. O'Malley reached across the table, her weathered hand covering Callie's. There's a difference between accepting help and being dependent, dear. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let others stand beside us. As if on cue, Callie's phone lit up with Caleb's name. She stared at it, remembering the pain in his eyes when he talked about Madeline. Answer it, Ruby urged. At least hear what he has to say. With trembling fingers, Callie accepted the call. Hello. I just heard about the emergency hearing. Caleb's voice was tight with concern. Where are you? At Mrs. O'Malley's. Caleb, there's something I need to ask you. I know. He sighed heavily. You've been researching Madeline. Callie's breath caught. How did you? Davidson monitors online searches about Thorne Technologies. He flagged the activity. A pause. We need to talk, but not over the phone. Can I come over? She looked at Mrs. O'Malley, who nodded encouragingly. Yes. Mason's still awake. I'll be there in 20 minutes. After hanging up, Callie paced the small kitchen while Ruby and Mrs. O'Malley exchanged worried glances. Mason babbled happily in his playpen, oblivious to the tension around him. The doorbell rang exactly 20 minutes later. When Mrs. O'Malley opened the door, Caleb stood there in a charcoal suit that looked slightly rumpled, as if he'd been running his hands through his hair all day. His eyes found Callie immediately. Hi, she said softly. Hi. He stepped inside, nodding respectfully to Mrs. O'Malley and Ruby. His attention was caught by Mason, who squealed and reached for him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips as he lifted the baby. Hey, buddy. We'll give you some privacy, Ruby said, ushering Mrs. O'Malley toward the door. We'll be upstairs if you need anything. Once they were alone, Caleb sat on the couch with Mason in his lap. The baby immediately grabbed his tie, a familiar gesture that made Callie's heart ache. You should have come to me directly, Caleb said quietly. About Madeline, about your questions. Would you have told me the truth? His jaw tightened. What exactly do you want to know? Did Myers Tech really sue you for wrongful death? When he nodded, she pressed on. Why? If the police ruled it suicide. Because I blamed myself, he said, his voice raw. And maybe they weren't entirely wrong. Mason tugged on his tie, demanding attention. Caleb absently handed him a toy from the nearby playpen, his eyes never leaving Callie's face. When I discovered Madeline was spying for Myers Tech, I confronted her. She broke down, said she'd had no choice, that they had something on her, were threatening her family. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't believe her. I was so angry about the betrayal, I couldn't see past it. I called the police, pressed charges, and she killed herself. That's what the evidence suggested. But Andrea Myers claimed Madeline had reached out to her the night she died, saying she was afraid of what I might do to silence her. His laugh was bitter. The lawsuit alleged that either I had her killed, or I drove her to suicide by threatening to destroy her family. Callie sat beside him, close enough to feel his warmth but not touching. What was the truth? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him. After her death, we discovered that Myers Tech really had been blackmailing her. Her brother was involved in some illegal trading, and they used it as leverage. I didn't find out until it was too late. So you settled the lawsuit? Yes. Not because I was responsible for her death, but because I failed her. She came to me for help that night, and I turned her away. He looked down at Mason, who had fallen asleep against his chest. But I won't make that mistake again. Understanding dawned. That's why you're so determined to help me with Elliot. You're trying to atone for Madeline. At first, maybe, Caleb's free hand found hers. But now, Callie, what I feel for you has nothing to do with Madeline or redemption. You have to know that. Before she could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. Davidson had sent a group message. Lancaster spotted entering Myers Tech building an hour ago. Meeting still in progress. He's working with them, Callie realized. The custody battle, the corporate takeover attempts, it's all connected. Yes. Caleb's grip on her hand tightened. Lancaster gets custody of Mason, proving you're an unfit mother who tried to use me for protection. Myers Tech gets ammunition to paint me as someone who takes advantage of vulnerable women, plus whatever corporate secrets they can gather in the process. We can't let them win. Callie's voice was stronger than she felt. Not just for Mason, but for Madeline, too. She deserved better than to be a pawn in their games. Caleb studied her face in the dim light. Helping me fight them could cost you everything. The custody hearing is next week, I know. But running away and hiding didn't work before. Maybe it's time to stand and fight. A small smile touched his lips. You know, when you crashed into my arms that day in the rain, I thought you were running from something. I didn't realize you were actually running towards something. Neither did I. Callie looked at Mason, peaceful in Caleb's arms. But I'm tired of letting fear control my life. Elliot, Myers Tech, they're counting on that fear. On me being too scared to fight back. It won't be easy, Caleb warned. They'll dig up everything, try to turn us against each other. Then we don't let them. She squeezed his hand. No more secrets, no more doubts. Whatever they throw at us, we face it together. Mason stirred slightly, his tiny hand still clutching Caleb's tie. In that moment, looking at them, Callie felt something shift inside her, a piece of her broken heart healing, making room for something new. Together, Caleb agreed softly, and in that one word was a promise that made her breath catch. Outside, the Charleston night was alive with possibilities and dangers. Somewhere, Elliot Lancaster and Andrea Myers were plotting their next moves. But here, in Mrs. O'Malley's cozy living room, with Mason sleeping peacefully and Caleb's hand warm in hers, Callie felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Tomorrow, they would face their demons. Tonight, they would hold on to this moment of peace, gathering strength for the battle ahead. Ruby and Mrs. O'Malley found them like that an hour later, Mason asleep on Caleb's chest, Callie curled against his side, their hands still intertwined. The older women exchanged knowing looks but said nothing, understanding that some moments were too precious to interrupt. The newspaper articles still lay scattered on the kitchen table, Madeline's face smiling up from the photographs. But her story was no longer just a tragedy to be feared. It was a reminder of what happened when secrets and fear were allowed to win. This time would be different. This time, love would be stronger than fear. Julian Bennett's law office exuded quiet power, all mahogany and leather with views of the Charleston skyline. Callie sat straight-backed in one of the visitor chairs, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as the lawyer reviewed the custody documents. They're pushing hard and fast, Bennett said, his silver hair catching the morning light. Lancaster's team has built a compelling narrative. Young mother with unstable housing, minimum wage job, no health insurance, while spending evenings at the symphony with one of Charleston's wealthiest bachelors. They're trying to make me look irresponsible, Callie said quietly. No, Bennett set down the papers. They're trying to make you look calculating. The poor young mother using her child to snare a rich man's attention. He glanced at Caleb, who stood by the window. No offense. What are our options? Caleb asked, his voice tight. Bennett leaned back, studying them both. Honestly, the best defense would be distance. If Callie cuts all ties with you, gets a better apartment, focuses solely on Mason, no. Callie's voice was firm. And I won't let Elliot dictate my life anymore. Then we fight. Bennett pulled out another file. But you need to understand what that means. They'll dig into everything. Your family, your marriage to Lancaster, Every detail of your relationship with Caleb. It will get ugly. What about Lancaster's history? Caleb moved to stand behind Callie's chair. The emotional abuse during their marriage. Without documentation, it's her word against his. And his lawyers will paint her as bitter, making false accusations. Callie's phone buzzed. A text from Ruby with a photo of Mason playing at daycare. The sight of his happy face gave her strength. What do we do first? We need to establish stability, Bennett said. Proper housing, childcare, healthcare. Show the court you can provide for Mason independently of either Lancaster or Mr. Thorne. I have an idea about that, Caleb interjected. The apartment above the Daily Grind is vacant. Ruby mentioned the owners looking to sell. Callie turned to him sharply. Caleb, I can't afford. Ruby can, he interrupted. She's been wanting to expand the business. If she buys the building, she can offer you the apartment as part of your employment package. Everything legal and documented. Bennett nodded approvingly. That could work. Employment-linked housing is common and respectable. Lancaster's team would have trouble arguing against it. But the cost, Callie started, is an investment in my business. Ruby's voice came from the doorway. They turned to find her standing there, clutching a folder. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was horrible. Ruby? Callie stood. What are you doing here? Being your boss. Ruby sat down, pulling out papers. I've been thinking about buying the building for months. The owner's willing to sell, and the bank approved my loan this morning. She smiled at Callie. The apartment needs a good tenant manager. Someone reliable who knows the business. Tears pricked at Callie's eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Ruby's expression softened. Let people help you, honey. Not because you're weak, but because you deserve support. Bennett cleared his throat. This is exactly what we need. Stable housing. Career advancement. All through legitimate business channels. Lancaster's team can't claim Mr. Thorne's influence because he's not involved in the transaction. There's more, Ruby said, pulling out another document. I'm promoting you to assistant manager. Comes with health insurance, including dependent coverage. Callie felt overwhelmed. Ruby, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Ruby's voice was firm. Because that little boy of yours deserves his mama at her strongest. And you deserve a chance to build a real life, not just survive. A knock at the door interrupted them. Davidson entered, his expression grave. Mr. Thorne, we have a situation. Caleb straightened. What is it? Myers Tech just announced a hostile takeover bid for Lancaster Industries. Davidson handed him a tablet. They're joining forces. The news hit like a thunderbolt. Bennett swore softly, grabbing the tablet to read the details. This changes things, he said. Lancaster's not just after custody anymore. He's using this case as leverage in a corporate war. No, Callie whispered. He's using Mason as leverage. Caleb's hands gripped the back of her chair. The timing's not a coincidence. The custody hearing's in 3 days. They're hoping you'll be distracted, Bennett mused. Fighting the corporate battle while trying to help with the custody case. They want to force you to choose. Let them try. Caleb's voice was steel. Davidson, get me everything on the Myers-Lancaster merger. Every detail, every weakness. Already on it, sir. Davidson paused. There's one more thing. A reporter from the Charleston Herald is asking for comment. Apparently, someone leaked photos of you and Miss Harper at the symphony. Ruby cursed colorfully. Are those vultures? No, Callie said suddenly. This is good. They all turned to her. Bennett raised an eyebrow. How so? They want to control the narrative? She stood, drawing on every lesson in poise her mother had taught her. Then let's tell our own story. On our terms. Caleb studied her face. You want to talk to the press? I want to tell the truth. About Elliot. About the abuse. About why I left. Her voice strengthened. Let them paint me as a gold digger. The truth will speak for itself. Bennett looked thoughtful. It's risky. But if we control the interview, choose the right reporter. I know someone, Ruby offered. Megan Walsh at the Herald. She specializes in human interest stories, has a good reputation for fairness. It's your decision, Caleb told Callie softly. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. Callie looked at the custody papers on Bennett's desk, then at the photo of Mason on her phone. For so long, she'd been reacting to Elliot's moves, always on the defensive. Maybe it was time to change the game. Set up the interview, she said. But not just with me. With all of us. Ruby grinned. Count me in. I've got some choice words about certain rich men who think they can bully single mothers. We'll need to prepare carefully, Bennett cautioned. Every word will be scrutinized. Then we'll make every word count. Callie's voice was steady. Elliot wants a war? Fine. But this time, I'm choosing the battlefield. Davidson's phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he read the message. Mr. Lancaster just called an emergency board meeting at Lancaster Industries. The vote on the Myers Tech merger is scheduled for tomorrow. That fast? Caleb frowned. They're rushing it. Why? Because they know we're fighting back. Callie realized. They need to move before we can gather our forces. Bennett began gathering papers. I'll start preparing statements for both the custody hearing and the corporate merger. We need to show these are separate issues, that Mrs. Harper's case stands on its own merits. I'll call Megan, Ruby said, pulling out her phone. See if we can get the interview done today, before the merger announcement goes public. As everyone moved into action, Callie felt Caleb's hand slip into hers. You okay? He asked softly. No, she admitted. I'm terrified, but I'm done letting fear win. He squeezed her hand. You know this could get worse before it gets better. Once the interview runs, once the merger news breaks, I know. She turned to face him. Are you ready for that? Your board already has doubts because of me. This could hurt your company. My company will survive. His free hand cupped her cheek. But I won't survive watching you lose, Mason. Not when I can help prevent it. The moment was interrupted by Ruby clearing her throat. Interviews set for 2 o'clock. Megan's willing to meet us at the Daily Grind. Callie nodded, straightening her shoulders. Then we have work to do. As they left Bennett's office, the Charleston sunshine felt different somehow. Not warming, but illuminating. In 3 days, she would face Elliot in court. Tomorrow, the business world would be rocked by the Myers-Lancaster merger. And in a few hours, she would tell her story to the world. But for the first time since that rainy day when she'd crashed into Caleb's arms, Callie felt truly steady on her feet. She had a home waiting above the Daily Grind, a job with a future, and people willing to stand beside her. Let Elliot and Andrea Myers plot their corporate wars. She had something stronger than their money and influence. She had the truth, and finally, she had the courage to tell it. The storm was breaking, but this time, she wasn't running from it. This time, she was ready to dance in the rain. The Daily Grind had never been so quiet. Megan Walsh from the Charleston Herald sat at a corner table, her recorder placed carefully between them as Callie took a deep breath and began her story. I was 19 when I met Elliot Lancaster, she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Young enough to mistake control for care, to think that someone wanting to possess you meant they loved you. Ruby moved quietly behind the counter, preparing coffee with cinnamon, liquid courage in a ceramic cup. Caleb sat beside Callie, close enough to support but not so close as to overshadow her moment. The abuse wasn't physical at first, Callie continued. It was subtle. Comments about my clothes, my friends, my dreams. He'd say he only wanted what was best for me, that I needed guidance. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already trapped. Megan leaned forward, her dark eyes compassionate but professional. Trapped how? Financially, emotionally, socially. Elliot had a way of making everything seem like my fault. If I spoke up at dinner parties, I was embarrassing him. If I stayed quiet, I was being cold. The rules kept changing, but the punishment was always the same. Isolation, criticism, the constant threat that I'd lose everything if I didn't comply. What changed? Megan asked. What made you finally leave? Callie's hand instinctively touched her phone, where a photo of Mason served as her background. I got pregnant, and suddenly, the stakes were different. I could handle Elliot's abuse when it was just me, but the thought of Mason growing up in that environment, she shook her head. I couldn't let my son think that was what love looked like. The interview continued, weaving through her escape, her struggles, and finally, the current custody battle. When Megan asked about Caleb, Callie was ready. Meeting Caleb wasn't about finding another powerful man to protect me, she said firmly. It was about discovering that not all strength comes from dominance, that real love lifts you up instead of tearing you down. Caleb's hand found hers under the table, a quiet gesture of support that spoke volumes. Ruby stepped forward then, adding her perspective as Callie's employer and friend. She detailed the promotion, the apartment arrangement, all the legitimate business decisions that had nothing to do with Caleb's influence. As the interview wound down, Megan turned to Caleb. And your response to accusations that this custody battle is connected to the Myers Tech situation? My personal life and my business dealings are separate matters, he stated clearly. My support for Callie comes from recognizing the strength it took to rebuild her life, not from any corporate strategy. After Megan left, promising the article would run in tomorrow's paper, Callie finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Do you think it will make a difference? Truth usually does, Ruby said, bringing fresh coffee. Even if some people don't want to hear it, as if summoned by the thought, Callie's phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. Brave performance, but we both know the truth about what kind of mother you really are. Before she could respond, another message arrived. This one from Andrea Myers. Check your email. Consider it a preview of tomorrow's board meeting. With trembling fingers, Callie opened her email. The attached video made her blood run cold. What is it? Caleb asked, noting her expression. Security footage, she whispered, from my last night in Elliot's house, when I took Mason and ran. The video played silently on her phone. Callie rushing through darkened halls with a bundled baby taking jewelry from Elliot's safe, grabbing cash from his study drawer. He's going to say I stole from him, she realized. That I planned it all, took advantage of him just like I'm supposedly doing to you. The money was yours, Caleb said firmly. You had every right. But it won't look that way in court, Callie's voice cracked. A desperate woman stealing in the night, taking a baby from his father's home. They'll say I'm unstable, untrustworthy. Ruby's hand gripped her shoulder. They'll say whatever they want. Doesn't make it true. Caleb was already on the phone with Bennett, explaining the situation. His expression grew grimmer as he listened to the lawyer's response. Bennett says they'll probably introduce the video at the hearing, he reported after hanging up. Try to undermine your credibility right before the custody decision. Can we stop it? No, but we can prepare for it. He took her hands in his. Tell me everything about that night. Every detail, every reason. We'll make them understand you were escaping abuse, not stealing. As Callie recounted that terrible night, Davidson burst through the door. Sir, we have a problem. The board meeting's been moved up. It's starting now. Caleb cursed. They're not waiting for tomorrow. They're using the chaos from the interview to push through the merger today. Go, Callie said immediately. Your company needs you. You need me, too. I need you to be strong enough to fight them on all fronts. She squeezed his hands. I've got Ruby and Bennett. Go protect what you've built. He hesitated, then pulled her into a fierce kiss that tasted of coffee and promise. This isn't over. No, she agreed softly. It's just beginning. After Caleb left, Ruby locked the shop's door, flipping the sign to closed. Come on, she said. Let's go see your new apartment. The movers finished bringing your things up an hour ago. The apartment above the daily grind was a revelation. Spacious, sunny, with new furniture Ruby had somehow arranged without telling her. Mason's room was already set up, his crib positioned perfectly by the window. Ruby, this is too much. This is exactly enough. Ruby's voice brooked no argument. This is your home now. Your fresh start. Callie's phone buzzed again. Bennett asking to meet tomorrow to prepare for the hearing. As she responded, a news alert popped up. Breaking. Lancaster Industries board deadlocked on Myers Tech merger. She clicked the link, reading quickly. The board was split, with Elliot pushing hard for the merger while other members expressed concerns about the hasty timeline and unusual circumstances. Another text from Elliot arrived. Your little interview won't save you. Some battles can't be won with truth alone. Callie stared at the message, then at her new apartment, her sanctuary above the coffee shop that had become her salvation. Ruby was right. This was her home, her fresh start, and she would fight for it with everything she had. Ruby, she said suddenly, I need your help with something. Anything, honey. The video they're going to show at the hearing. I want to tell that story too, but not just to the judge. She turned to her friend, determination replacing fear. I want to tell every abuse survivor in Charleston what really happened that night. Show them they're not alone. Ruby's eyes gleamed. Megan would definitely run a follow-up piece. Not just Megan. Callie's mind raced with possibilities. Every major outlet in the city. If Elliot wants to show that video in court, fine. But first, everyone will know exactly why a mother would grab her baby and run in the middle of the night. It's risky, Ruby warned. Lancaster's lawyers will say you're trying to influence the court through the media. Let them. Callie walked to Mason's room, watching her son sleep peacefully in his new crib. I'm done being afraid of the truth. Her phone buzzed one more time. Caleb. Board meeting in chaos. Lancaster's losing support. Whatever happens, I love you. Both of you. 3 simple words that changed everything. Standing in her new home, with her son sleeping safely and Ruby's unwavering support beside her, Callie finally understood what real power felt like. It wasn't in money or influence or legal maneuvers. It was in the strength to tell your truth, to stand your ground, to love without fear. Tomorrow, she would tell her story again, not just the polished version from today's interview, but the raw, honest truth of a mother's desperate choice to save her child from a life of abuse. Let Elliot show his security footage. Let Andrea Myers play her corporate games. Callie had something stronger than their evidence and accusations. She had her voice, and this time, she was going to use it. The Charleston Evening News played quietly on the TV in Callie's new apartment, its blue light casting shadows across the living room. Mason slept in his crib nearby while Callie sat curled on her couch, watching her own story unfold across every major news outlet in the city. In a powerful series of interviews, the anchor reported, local mother Callie Harper has sparked a citywide conversation about domestic abuse and the impossible choices victims face. Her account of fleeing an abusive marriage with her infant son has resonated deeply with the community. The screen showed clips from her latest interviews, not just with Megan Walsh now, but with every reporter willing to listen. In each one, Callie spoke directly to the camera, her voice steady as she described that final night in Elliot's house. I took what was legally mine, she'd explained. And the jewelry was my grandmother's, the money from my personal account that Elliot had controlled. But more importantly, I took my chance at freedom, because sometimes surviving means running in the dark, means looking like the villain in someone else's security footage. Her phone buzzed with another message from Bennett. Judge Wilson is aware of the media coverage. Lancaster's team is crying foul, claiming you're trying to prejudice the court. Let them, she typed back. The truth doesn't become less true just because more people know it. A soft knock at her door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw Caleb, looking exhausted in a rumpled suit. Hey, she said softly, letting him in. How was the emergency board session? Still ongoing. He loosened his tie, dropping onto her couch. They've called a recess until morning. Lancaster's losing support, but Myers Tech is pushing hard. They're offering an incredible premium for the shares. Callie brought him a cup of coffee with cinnamon, a habit they'd both acquired. Have you slept at all? Sleep is for people who aren't fighting corporate takeovers. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I saw your interviews. All of them. And you're the bravest person I've ever met. He pulled her down beside him, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. But Lancaster's furious. Davidson says he's been making calls all evening. Trying to damage control? Trying to find anyone who will contradict your story. Former staff, old friends, your family. Callie stiffened. My family hasn't spoken to me since I left Elliot. They said I was breaking my marriage vows, bringing shame to the family name. I know. Caleb's arm tightened around her, but Lancaster's offering them a chance to set the record straight. His words. Before she could respond, her phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. When she answered, her mother's voice filled the line for the first time in nearly 2 years. Really, Callie? Airing our family's dirty laundry on the evening news. Callie's hand trembled, but her voice remained steady. Hello, Mother. I'm surprised you're watching local Charleston news all the way in Richmond. Elliot called. Victoria Harper's voice dripped disapproval. He's very concerned about Mason's welfare. Says you're living above a coffee shop, working as a barista. Actually, I'm assistant manager now. Callie felt Caleb's supportive presence beside her. And my son has everything he needs. Does he? Because from what Elliot tells me, you're using him as a pawn to entrap another wealthy man. Really, darling, couldn't you have been more subtle? The old familiar pain stabbed at Callie's heart, but it was duller now, less debilitating. Is that what you think? That I'm making up abuse allegations to what? Get attention? Money? I think you're doing what you've always done. Creating drama. Playing the victim. No. Callie's voice cut through her mother's criticism. What I've always done is try to please you. Try to be the perfect daughter who married the man you chose and suffered in silence. But I'm not that girl anymore. Clearly, Victoria sniffed. Elliot's lawyers called. They want us to testify about your Instability. Your history of emotional outbursts. Your teenage rebellions. You mean when I wanted to go to college instead of debut at the Richmond Ball? When I dared to have dreams beyond being someone's wife? Callie stood, pacing her living room. Go ahead, Mother. Testify. Tell the court how you pushed me into Elliot's arms at 19 because he had the right family name, the right bank account. Tell them how you ignored every red flag, every cry for help. Callie. But first, ask yourself this. Do you really want Mason to grow up thinking abuse is acceptable? That power and control are the same as love, because that's what you taught me. Silence filled the line. Then, barely audible, we did what we thought was best. No, you did what was easiest. What looked best to your society friends. Callie's voice softened. But I'm choosing what's actually best for my son, even if it's harder, even if it means standing alone. You're not alone, Victoria said quietly. That's what worries me. This man you're with now, this tech mogul, how is he different from Elliot? Callie looked at Caleb, who had moved to stand by Mason's crib, watching her son sleep with such gentle protectiveness. Because he doesn't want to own me, Mother. He wants to stand beside me. After she hung up, Caleb gathered her into his arms. You okay? No. She pressed her face into his shirt, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. But I will be. His phone buzzed. Another message about the board meeting. I should go, he said reluctantly. Early morning tomorrow. Stay. The word surprised them both. Just stay, please. He studied her face in the dim light. Callie, if anyone sees me leaving here in the morning with the custody hearing tomorrow, I don't care. She touched his cheek. You said you loved us. Did you mean it? You know I did. Then stay, because tomorrow's going to be hell. And tonight, I just want to feel safe. Understanding dawned in his eyes. This wasn't about passion or desire. This was about trust, about choosing to be vulnerable with someone who had earned it. Okay, he said softly. I'll stay. They ended up on her couch. Callie curled against his chest while they watched the late news coverage of both their battles, the custody fight and the corporate war becoming intertwined in the media narrative. Lancaster's team released a statement, Caleb noted, reading from his phone. Ms. Harper's media campaign is a calculated attempt to distract from her inability to provide a stable home for her child. Standard legal speak. And the Myers Tech merger. Stocks volatile. The market doesn't like the uncertainty. He set down his phone. But none of that matters right now. Tonight, it's just us. As if on cue, Mason stirred in his crib, making the little snuffling sound that usually preceded crying. But before Callie could move, Caleb was already there, gently lifting the baby. Hey, buddy, he murmured, settling back on the couch with Mason on his chest. Can't sleep either, huh? Callie watched them together, the powerful CEO who could sway markets with a word, now completely focused on soothing a fussy baby back to sleep. This, she realized, was what her mother had never understood. Real strength wasn't about control or dominance. It was about this, the courage to be gentle, to be vulnerable, to love without reservation. Mason drifted off again, his tiny hand clutching Caleb's tie even in sleep. Outside, Charleston hummed with late-night traffic and tomorrow's approaching storms. But here, in this moment, Callie felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. Whatever happens tomorrow, she whispered. Thank you for showing me what love is supposed to feel like. Caleb's free hand found hers in the darkness. Thank you for teaching me what it means to fight for something real. They fell asleep like that, Mason secure between them, while the TV droned on about corporate mergers and custody battles. Tomorrow would bring its own wars and its own challenges. But tonight, they had this, a family formed not by blood or law, but by choice, by love, by the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to stay. Dawn would come soon enough. For now, they held on to their piece of peace in the gathering storm. The Charleston County Courthouse loomed against the morning sky, its stone facade a monument to justice that felt more like a fortress. Callie smoothed her navy blue dress, conservative, maternal, chosen carefully with Bennett's guidance, and took a deep breath. Ready? Ruby asked beside her, holding Mason. The baby was dressed in his best outfit, dark curls neatly combed, looking every bit the cherished child he was. Reporters clustered at the courthouse steps, cameras flashing as Callie approached. Bennett moved smoothly to her side, creating a protective barrier. No comments until after the hearing, he reminded her gently. Inside, the courthouse hallway buzzed with tension. Caleb waited by the courtroom doors, impeccable in a charcoal suit despite having left her apartment only hours ago to change. Their eyes met, speaking volumes in silence. "The board meeting?" she asked quietly. "Delayed until this afternoon." His hand brushed hers briefly. "This comes first." The courtroom doors opened, and Callie's heart stopped. Elliot stood at the plaintiff's table, elegant as ever in a bespoke suit, his beard perfectly trimmed. The scent of his oud wood cologne reached her even at this distance, but it was the woman beside him that made her blood run cold. "Mother." Victoria Harper turned, her expression a mask of aristocratic distance. She'd chosen to sit on Elliot's side of the courtroom, a deliberate statement that hit Callie like a physical blow. "All rise," the bailiff called, the Honorable Judge Margaret Wilson presiding. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and silver hair. She studied both parties as everyone settled into their places. "Before we begin," Judge Wilson said, "I want to address the media attention this case has received. While I understand the public interest, this court's only concern is the welfare of the minor child. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," both lawyers responded. Lancaster's attorney, Richard Preston, rose first. "Your Honor, we'll demonstrate that Mrs. Harper's recent media campaign is part of a pattern of manipulative behavior. The evidence will show she's using her child as leverage in a complex game of financial and social advancement." He played the security footage then, Callie running through darkened halls, taking jewelry and cash. But Bennett was ready. "This footage shows exactly what my client described in her public statements," he argued. "A mother escaping an abusive situation with her child and her rightful property. We have documentation proving the jewelry belonged to her grandmother, and bank records showing the cash came from her personal account." Preston's smile was cold. "We have a witness who can speak to Ms. Harper's history of emotional instability. Mrs. Victoria Harper." Callie's mother took the stand, elegant in her pearls and Chanel suit, but as she raised her right hand to swear the oath, something changed in her expression. "Mrs. Harper," Preston began, "can you tell us about your daughter's history of emotional outbursts, her tendency to create drama for attention?" Victoria looked at Callie, then at Mason in Ruby's arms. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. "No," she said quietly. Preston blinked. "Excuse me." "I said no." Victoria's voice strengthened. "I won't help you destroy my daughter for telling the truth." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Elliot's face darkened dangerously. "Mrs. Harper," Preston tried again. "You agreed to testify." "I agreed to tell the truth." Victoria sat straighter. "The truth is, I failed my daughter. I saw the signs of abuse in her marriage. I saw how Elliot controlled her, isolated her, broke her spirit piece by piece, and I did nothing." Judge Wilson leaned forward. "Mrs. Harper, are you saying you witnessed abuse during your daughter's marriage?" "Yes, Your Honor. I saw the psychological abuse, the financial control, the constant criticism. I saw my vibrant, intelligent daughter become a shadow of herself." Victoria's voice cracked, "and I told her to endure it, because that's what women in our circle did. We endured. We survived. We pretended everything was fine." Elliot stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this testimony is clearly influenced by the media circus." "Sit down, Mr. Lancaster," Judge Wilson ordered sharply. "Mrs. Harper, please continue." Victoria turned to face Callie directly. "When you ran that night, taking Mason to safety, you did what I never had the courage to do. You broke the cycle." She looked at the judge. "My daughter is an excellent mother. She protected her child from the same toxic environment I helped trap her in. She deserves custody." Before anyone could respond, the courtroom doors burst open. Davidson rushed in, whispering urgently to Caleb. "Your Honor." Caleb stood. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's something the court needs to see." He handed a tablet to the bailiff. "This was just released by a whistleblower at Myers Tech." The judge accepted the tablet, her expression growing grave as she read. "Mr. Preston, are you aware of these documents?" Preston looked stricken. "Your Honor, They show collusion," Caleb stated clearly, "between Mr. Lancaster and Myers Technology, a planned corporate takeover using this custody battle as leverage. They intended to force me to choose between helping Miss Harper and saving my company." Judge Wilson's eyes narrowed. Mr. Lancaster, approach the bench. Elliot moved forward, his composure cracking. Your Honor, these corporate matters are separate from the custody issue. Are they? The judge held up the tablet. These messages explicitly discuss using your son as a pawn in a business strategy. That speaks directly to your fitness as a parent. The courtroom doors opened again. Andrea Myers walked in, flanked by federal agents. Your Honor, one agent announced. We have a warrant for Mr. Lancaster's arrest. The SEC has evidence of insider trading related to the Myers Tech merger. Everything happened at once then. Elliot lunged toward Callie, his face contorted with rage. You planned this. Caleb moved faster, placing himself between them. Security officers converged, restraining Elliot as he shouted accusations. Through it all, Mason remained surprisingly calm in Ruby's arms, watching the chaos with wide eyes. Order! Judge Wilson's gavel cracked like thunder. In light of these developments, this court is prepared to make an immediate ruling. She looked at Callie. Miss Harper, approach the bench. Callie walked forward on shaking legs. Behind her, she could hear the federal agents reading Elliot his rights. Miss Harper, the judge said quietly, this court has seen overwhelming evidence of your commitment to your child's welfare. You've shown remarkable courage in rebuilding your life, seeking legitimate employment, and creating a stable home. She glanced at the gallery. The support system you've built, your employer, your friends, even your mother's unexpected testimony, speaks volumes. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm granting you full custody of Mason, with no visitation rights for Mr. Lancaster pending the outcome of his criminal case. The judge's eyes softened slightly. Sometimes the strongest thing a mother can do is run. You ran toward a better life for your son. Never doubt that choice. Tears spilled down Callie's cheeks as the judge made the ruling official. When she turned to sew, Ruby was already bringing Mason to her. She clutched her son close, breathing in his sweet baby scent. The courtroom slowly emptied. Elliot led away in handcuffs. Andrea Myers in quiet discussion with federal agents, reporters rushing out to file their stories. Through it all, Caleb stood quietly beside her, a steady presence in the storm. Victoria approached hesitantly. Callie, Thank you, Callie whispered, for telling the truth. I'm so sorry. For everything. Victoria reached out, touching Mason's cheek gently. Maybe we could have coffee sometime. Start over. Callie looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw something new. Possibility. I'd like that. Bennett gathered his papers, smiling. Congratulations. Though I suspect we'll be busy with press statements for a while. Later, Caleb said firmly. Right now, I think we all need coffee. Ruby grinned. Good thing I know a place. As they left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about Elliot's arrest, the Myers Tech scandal, the custody ruling, but Callie barely heard them. She was focused on the feeling of Mason in her arms, Caleb's hand at the small of her back, Ruby and her mother flanking them protectively. The morning sun broke through Charleston's clouds, turning the world golden. Yesterday's storms had cleared, leaving behind a sky as bright and boundless as possibility. They had won, not just the custody battle, but something larger, the right to define their own story, to choose their own family, to build love on their own terms. Mason reached for Caleb's tie, a gesture so familiar it made Callie's heart ache with joy. This was her victory, her family, her truth, and no one could take that away again. 6 months later, the daily grind hummed with morning activity. Sunlight streamed through newly installed windows, catching the gleam of fresh paint and modern fixtures. The renovation had transformed the cafe while keeping its warm, welcoming soul intact. Callie moved behind the counter with practiced grace, creating intricate latte art for the regulars who'd supported her through everything. The diamond ring on her left hand caught the light as she worked. Simple and elegant, just like Caleb's proposal had been. Right here in the cafe where their story began. Looking good, boss, Ruby called, emerging from the office. Though Callie was now part owner of the daily grind, Ruby refused to give up the mother hen role she'd claimed from the start. Mason down for his nap? Callie asked, glancing toward the upstairs apartment. Out like a light, your mother's reading him stories again. Ruby grinned. Never thought I'd see Victoria Harper so comfortable in a coffee shop apartment. The transformation in Callie's relationship with her mother had been unexpected but beautiful. After her testimony in court, Victoria had thrown herself into grandmother duties with the same determination she'd once applied to maintaining social status. She'd even started drinking coffee with cinnamon. The bell above the door chimed. Davidson entered, nodding to Callie as he did his routine security sweep, a habit he'd maintained even after Elliot's conviction and imprisonment for securities fraud. "All clear," he reported, accepting his usual black coffee. "Though you might want to check the morning papers." Callie picked up the Charleston Herald, smiling at the headline. Thorne Technologies launches revolutionary security system. Stock soars. The article detailed how Caleb had not only prevented the hostile takeover but had emerged stronger, with innovative new technology and a sterling reputation for corporate integrity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Baby brother's actually smiling in board meetings now. "What have you done to him?" Before she could respond, familiar footsteps sounded on the stairs. Caleb appeared, carrying a very awake Mason who was clutching his favorite toy, a silver tie clip Caleb had given him. "Someone," Caleb announced, "refuses to nap without his coffee shop soundtrack. Just like his mother," Victoria commented, following them down. Well, Callie never could sleep in silence either. Callie took Mason, breathing in his sweet baby scent mixed with the faintest trace of Caleb's cologne. At 18 months, her son was thriving, secure in the love of his expanded family, surrounded by people who would move heaven and earth to protect him. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, creating pools of golden light. Regular customers worked on laptops or chatted in comfortable corners, while new faces wandered in, drawn by the cafe's growing reputation. "We should head out soon," Caleb said, checking his watch. "The contractor's meeting us at the house at 3. Their new home, a beautiful colonial revival in Charleston's historic district, was nearly ready, close enough to the daily grind for Callie to maintain her role in the business, but with enough space for their growing family. The garden suite was already designated as Victoria's space for extended visits. "Almost done," Callie promised, handing Mason to Ruby. She had one last task before leaving, something she'd been doing every day since winning custody. At a quiet table in the corner, she sat down with her journal. Each day she wrote a letter to Mason, documenting their journey. Someday, when he was old enough to understand, she would give him these pages filled with their story. Today's entry flowed easily. "My dearest Mason, 6 months ago we were running from shadows, trying to survive. Today, we're building a life filled with light. Your father is in prison, but not because I won and he lost. He's there because truth has a way of rising to the surface and, like cream in coffee, you have a new father now, one who measures his strength not by how much he can control, but by how much he can protect and nurture." Caleb proposed right here in this cafe, kneeling on the exact spot where I first crashed into his arms in the rain. "He asked for your blessing first, presenting you with that tie clip you love so much. Your grandmother is healing too. Yesterday, she taught you to blow on hot chocolate to cool it, just like she used to do with me. Small moments, building bridges across years of pain. Ruby's talking about franchising the daily grind, creating safe spaces in every neighborhood, places where people can find warmth, community, and maybe even the courage to change their lives. But most importantly, you are loved, not as a possession or a pawn, but as the miraculous soul you are. Every morning, I watch you discover the world with fresh eyes, and I know that all the storms we weathered were worth it. You'll grow up knowing that love doesn't hurt, that strength can be gentle, that family is something we choose every day, and whenever you need reminding, there will always be coffee with cinnamon waiting for you here." Callie closed the journal, tucking it safely in her bag. Through the cafe windows, she could see Charleston bustling with life. The same streets that had once felt like a prison now represented possibility. "Ready?" Caleb asked softly, appearing beside her. She stood, taking Mason from Ruby. Her son immediately reached for Caleb's tie, a gesture that had become his way of asking to be held by both of them. "Actually," she said, "could we stay a few more minutes? I want to make us all coffee." Caleb smiled, understanding in his eyes. With cinnamon? Always with cinnamon. They gathered around a table, Callie, Caleb, Mason, Victoria, and Ruby. Outside, the world moved at its hectic pace, but here, in this moment, time seemed to slow. Callie watched the steam rise from their cups, carrying the sweet smell of cinnamon. She thought about that rainy day when she'd run into Caleb's arms, how a single moment of mistaken identity had changed everything. Mason babbled happily, secure in the circle of love surrounding him. Victoria and Ruby discussed renovation plans for the cafe's second floor. Caleb's hand found hers under the table, their rings clicking softly together. This was her victory, not the custody battle or Elliot's downfall or even the successful business. This moment, this family built from choice and courage and love. This was what she'd been running toward all along. "I love you," Caleb murmured, low enough for only her to hear. Callie squeezed his hand, remembering all the time she'd thought love meant pain. Now she knew better. Love was coffee with cinnamon, tie clips turned into toys, midnight lullabies, and second chances. Love was choosing to stay, choosing to trust, choosing to build something beautiful from the ashes of what was broken. "I love you too," she whispered back. All of this, every moment. Mason reached for her cup, and she shifted it away with practiced ease. His laughter, bright and fearless, filled the cafe. Outside, the Charleston sun painted the world in shades of possibility. But inside the daily grind, Callie had everything she needed: her son, her family, her home, and always, always, the sweet promise of coffee with cinnamon. The end. 2 years later, the sound of small feet pattering across hardwood floors echoed through the colonial revival house. Mason, now 3.5, ran through the kitchen in his miniature suit, a tiny blue tie clip gleaming at his collar. "Slow down, sweetheart," Callie called, one hand resting on her growing baby bump while the other adjusted a vase of fresh flowers. The breakfast nook overlooked their flourishing garden, where Victoria was tending to her prized roses, a hobby that had replaced her obsession with social status. "But Mama," Mason protested, "I want to go to the party." The party was the Daily Grind's 5th location opening in Charleston. What had started as one cozy cafe had blossomed into a chain of safe havens, each maintaining the original's warm atmosphere and commitment to community. Ruby oversaw them all with maternal pride, ensuring each location had resources available for those seeking escape from domestic violence. Caleb appeared in the doorway, his own tie a perfect match to their son's, someone ready for their ribbon-cutting duties. Mason ran to him, being scooped up with practiced ease. "Can I use the big scissors?" "The safety ones," Callie interjected, earning a knowing grin from her husband. The drive to the new location took them past familiar landmarks: the courthouse where they'd won their freedom, the spot where they'd first met in the rain. Each place held memories, but none haunted them anymore. They were just chapters in their story, stepping stones that had led them here. The new daily grind was packed with well-wishers. Ruby directed operations like a General D, while Victoria charmed customers with stories about her grandbabies, present and future. Above the counter hung a framed copy of the Charleston Herald from 3 years ago, preserving the moment when truth had triumphed over power. As Mason proudly helped cut the ribbon, with carefully guarded safety scissors, Callie felt the baby kick. Caleb's hand immediately covered hers, a gesture that had become instinctive during this pregnancy. "Still think it's a girl?" he whispered. "Definitely," she smiled, "and she'll have her daddy wrapped around her finger just like her brother does." The celebration continued into the evening. Mason fell asleep in his grandmother's lap, his tie clip clutched in one small hand. Victoria hummed softly, the same lullaby she'd once sung to Callie, looking around at her family, blood and chosen. Callie felt the familiar warmth of gratitude. Ruby was teaching a new barista the perfect coffee-to-cinnamon ratio. Davidson, still officially head of security but unofficially family, snuck Mason's favorite cookies onto Victoria's plate. Olivia, now a regular fixture at family gatherings, was already planning the new baby's wardrobe. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Caleb's arm slipped around her waist. "Just thinking about rain," she murmured, "and how sometimes the worst storms bring the most beautiful beginnings." He kissed her temple softly. "Speaking of beginnings, have you written in Mason's journal today?" The journal tradition had continued, now accompanied by a new one waiting for their daughter. Every day, a few lines about love, truth, and the power of choosing one's own path. "Later," she said, leaning into his embrace. "Right now, I just want to remember this moment." Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, tapping against the windows like a familiar lullaby. But inside, the daily grind, surrounded by the warmth of family and the sweet scent of coffee with cinnamon, Callie knew with absolute certainty she would never run from the rain again. She was exactly where she belonged. The end. If you had to choose between pursuing your emotional freedom or maintaining your family's approval, which decision would you make? Just as Callie faced this dilemma when she left a life of apparent privilege to protect her son from abuse, many people find themselves torn between their personal truths and family expectations. What would your choice be, and why? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.